You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side.
God bless America. Welcome to The Ranch, everybody, the podcast where we explore the people and happenings of Dry Creek Ranch and the surrounding Eagle areas. My guest today is a fantastic woman. She's a seasoned teacher, a mother of two, a super interesting person, and somebody I just really enjoy talking to and hanging out with. And hearing her perspective on the public education here, especially compared to the private school that her students were going to back in California, was great to hear. But without further ado, the woman, the myth, the legend, Joy Dvorak.
It's a little painful.
He doesn't even know I exist, Jan.
I know. But it's okay. It's what we do.
I guess I never, as a younger dude, I never had the sensation that, like, some girl doesn't even know I exist.
Oh, really?
Like, maybe I was just so blunt that I was like, hi, I'm Matt. Like, she knows now. Yes, probably.
But I think there's some, well, now that I'm an adult, I can say that there's, like, I can appreciate that naivety, right? Like that like not tryingness. Like,
no,
I'm
still like that.
That's just who you are. Like, you're authentic. It's the guys that, really, like, want to be noticed and, like, put themselves out there and want girls to pay attention to them. That's kind of where it's like, just not as attractive.
Just not. Listen, mate, cheers. Thank you for coming.
You're
God
welcome.
bless you, woman.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know any guys who dislike guys, like, categorically. Mm-hmm. Like, that's,
Gotcha.
I've never had a thing where I've met someone or even had friends with girls that are like, oh, that's, Brian. Brian just doesn't like other guys. But I know plenty of women who hate other women.
Right.
Why is that, Joy? Solve this problem with me.
Oh, boy. Wow. I think there's just a natural competitiveness with women that's unspoken. And it's something we have to navigate from an early age. Like, I see it with my daughters all the time. Like, how to be confident in who you are and not let anybody else kind of shake that, right? And they work through it and they're open about it. Well, this girl's getting under my skin. This girl's looking at me. This girl said this about me. I mean, 99% of the drama that I've had with daughters has been with other girls. We haven't even, we put our toe in the water with boys, but it's all been the conflicts with girls and the competitiveness in sports and in looks and in dance and in all facets.
The thing you said right at the beginning, it's this unspoken competition. Because there was actually a very interesting study done, I think about 10 years ago. And what they did is they were trying to figure out, look, is it that women aren't aggressive, or is it that women are not aggressive in ways that you can very clearly observe? And so the experiment was actually really interesting. What they did is they had people wait in a waiting room for some appointment, like on campus. Okay, this is a college experiment. And what they would do is they would have a third girl, walk in and say, like, hey, I'm here to see whoever, right? It doesn't really matter. And in one experiment, they would have her dress up just normally, like sweats and hoodie and whatever, and walk in. And the two people watching, on average, like, never even noticed the person.
Right.
The two women sitting there were like, oh, whatever, another person. And then in another set of circumstances, she would walk in dressed like to the nines, but kind of like slutty.
Yeah,
not like,
yeah.
Not nice, but like short skirt and like revealing top.
Right.
And instantaneously, the two girls that were observing and just sitting there would be like, what the fuck is that girl doing? Like, who the hell does she think she is? So all of a sudden, you realize that they were responding defensively to this thing that this girl did without interacting with them at all. And it was that unspoken tension that really drove these other two random people to respond in a very intense way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see that with my girls. A funny story is that I actually heard the word slut being thrown around my household recently, which of course my ears perked up and I was like, let's talk more about that.
How do you mean?
Right. And I did. I was like, okay, so basically what you're saying is that this person is having sex with multiple people? Is that really like what this 14-year-old is doing? And they were like, oh no, Mom, that's not what that means. And I said, okay, well, define it for me. And it's exactly what you said. It's a girl who puts a lot of time into her appearance for the purpose of attracting attention from boys. And that is threatening / I'd say scary, sort of, to my girls who are a little naive. So, like, it's interesting in that regard. But I also think that every girl is going to have a different response to that, right? Like that girl, like in that experiment who walked in. Some girls are just going to be like, whoa, slut, right? And just label her and move on with their lives. Other girls are going to be threatened, I think, by the fact that she put this effort in. And if she wants to look like that, then what's wrong with me, right? Like, it's an immediate, like, reflection of you. And I think it's very different from guys. I mean, if you see a guy, it doesn't immediately reflect on who you are.
Well,
right?
Yes and no. I think the thing that guys do is, first off, the attraction guys can get, okay, does not come quickly or easily, right? So if I wanted to start lifting weights and like really start hitting it, I am months and months away from seeing any actual progress. There's very little I can do with my attire or like makeup or anything that could instantaneously flip a switch. Right. And for the guys that do put a lot of effort into that becomes part of their identity, and it becomes part of like their behavior system. Right. And more than anything, I know how to compete with that if I want to. Right. And it's not something that I'm looked down upon. Right. Okay, so for instance, say, Luke, our dear friend Luke, right? Say I'm like, I want to look like Luke. I want to be, which I could never be, right? But I'm like, I want to be huge. I know how to actually do that. I know how to address that, right? And
you could if you wanted to.
I could try. Yeah, I could absolutely try to move in that direction with my physicality. Right. But I think for a lot of young women, because again, I worked with teenagers in education for a long time. For a lot of young women, they're like, okay, look, I know I could put those clothes on and I could paint my face like that, but it also changes my character, right? And I compromise morality, or at least ethics, or whatever I think is important and valuable. Because say I was on the football team and I was really jacked because I was on the football team. I have form to some degree follows function. Right. Meaning that I had value outside of this. I wasn't doing this. I didn't get huge just to look good. But with women, especially dressing very provocatively, that's all you're doing. You're literally just saying, give me attention. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's tough. It's tough for everybody. It's tough to navigate in this world. I mean, it's tough for dads. Like, I know my husband is just trying to figure it out and get involved, but not get too involved. Let them express themselves, but let them know when they cross the line. We have a thing about going to church, and, your belly's got to be covered when you go to church. That's just...
Jesus does not want to see your midriff.
Exactly. That's just a rule. If we leave them for church and there's not enough clothes on, you go back upstairs. But school's kind of different, right? School is a whole nother animal where they're trying to fit in, and there is competition with other girls. And, we kind of give them the freedom, at school. But then other places, it's kind of like, okay. But it's tough. There's not a lot of clothes out there that, really help parents like us try to figure it out. So
yeah, I feel like a cranky old guy these days. Because I would have not frequently, but sometimes in my classroom, I would have a girl come in, and I was dealing only with like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, right? So they're pretty supercharged already.
Right.
And I would occasionally have a girl come in. I'm like, oh God, what are you doing?
Put some clothes on.
Yeah, and you could tell it was like a short circuit for the guys in the room. They're like, they just couldn't. They couldn't focus on anything. And there's one guy, Brandon, who just like I would make eye contact with another one of the guys. I'm like, oh no, here he goes, because he couldn't help it. Like you could see him just inching closer and closer and closer. He's like, oh, let me help you with this man. And he'd be like, oh, let me explain this to you. And,
right? But do you see, like, it's so different just because of what she wore.
Right.
But like, it doesn't work that way with you. You could wear anything and
Right.
it wouldn't matter.
No,
right?
it doesn't matter at all. And it was, and for that girl, I'd always be like, "Hey, I just got a new hoodie. Do you want to try this new hoodie here?" Yeah. So I'm like, "Oh, I got some new sweatpants. Like, put these on." She's like, "Well, I'm not really cold." I'm like, "Put the sweatpants on."
Wear them.
Yeah. Right. What ages did you teach?
So I taught littler ones. I started at 3rd grade, and I did 8 years at 3rd grade. And then I took 10 years off, and then I went back and did 4th grade, 5th grade, and 4th grade again. So kind of like 3rd to 5th was an age that I taught. So, the 4th, 5th graders are just starting to, get there with noticing each other. But they're still pretty innocent. It doesn't really come into the classroom. There's so many other distractions, so many others than, what somebody's wearing or how much skin they're showing at that age, which is why I love it. Because God bless you for dealing with those raging hormones.
They were pretty brutal sometimes. But you know what I liked? So I started my tutoring career working with 5th graders.
Yeah.
And I appreciated because the 5th graders were just starting to their heads were just starting to turn on.
Yep.
Like 6th and 7th graders can really get surly.
Right.
And you can't yell at them yet.
Right.
8th graders, you can kind of yell at.
Right.
Because they're like, "What are you doing, man? You're 14. Hey,
Right.
come on." And then high schoolers, it's game. You can hit them.
Yeah.
You can do anything you want. But the 5th graders, they were just starting to get a little snarky personality.
Right.
And some of them would be kind of going a little goth. You're like,
Right.
I know where you're going to be in 3 years.
Yeah.
But,
you can see it.
yes. But they were just starting to become people. And 3rd graders are still, lovey and nice. And, they're just balls of
Right.
"Oh,
Yeah,
I'm here. I'm very excited to be here."
Yes.
What specifically did you teach, or was it the whole? You guys probably weren't subject specific yet, were you?
No, but when at the last 3 years, I can speak more to because the first 8 years was like 2001 to 2009. That was a lifetime ago. That was before kids. The last 3 years are really more relevant. So I taught at a private school in the South Bay of California, and I was a core teacher, so I taught math, reading, or language arts, and history. And then they had enrichments where they would go out of the class for music, PE, science, art, drama. I think that was it. So it was beautiful. I had those preps built into my day. So I had them for a couple hours, and then they'd go out to an enrichment, and then I'd have them again. They'd go out to an enrichment. So there was a lot of back and forth. And I was responsible just to make sure that they could read and write and speak and have good skills.
Was this a religious-based school, or was it just?
It was independent.
Okay.
Yeah, considered independent and private. So, yeah.
So how did they determine what the core curriculum should be?
So it was a beautiful thing. They actually asked the teachers, and they actually would adopt a new curriculum. I wasn't ever there for a curriculum adoption because I was only there 3 years, but I knew that the year before I came, they had sat down with all the teachers and had a series of meetings and conversations and trials with a curriculum. It was teacher-based, the decision. I can't remember how it came to them, but it was definitely something that they all had input in. It wasn't like a top-down decision, which was like I said, the way it should be.
So they focus on, they're like, "Look, you guys are in the trenches. We have hired you, by the way. And especially in private school, you really don't have job security like you have in the public school." So they were able to say, "Hey, look, we are confident we have the best teachers because, one, when we got a not great teacher, we were able to get rid of that teacher. And two, we were able to select from a wide variety of characteristics, resume and whatnot, and personality that you may not be otherwise able to discriminate with in the public school."
Yes.
So they were able to select and get rid of much more effectively.
Oh, yes. The expectations were very high. It's private. And the 4th grade that I was teaching at the time, tuition was $24,000 a year. So, we knew what the parents were paying. And we knew that they were going to, if they didn't feel like they were getting their money's worth from us, they were going to let our principal know. And then we'd immediately hear about it. So you had to be on your game. It took me to the next level, for sure.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, in unexpected ways. I always was the kind of person who,
Sorry about that.
no problem, who overachieved, right? I'm just just been that way. Like always do more than I should sometimes. But almost to the point where I can be a little intense about it. And what I quickly learned of just a couple of months at this school was that I needed to have more fun. And so when the principal would walk in, I would have to turn it on. Like if it was even if it's just an informal walkthrough, like I knew what she was looking for. I knew she didn't want me to be too intense. And so I really had to work on keeping it fun and keeping it light and, just making sure that I was always playing with that boundary and never like going into like, let's work, So that was the growth that I had there. And I had a wonderful partner teacher who brought all of that out in me. We were absolutely the most amazing partners for each other because she forced me to keep it fun. We would laugh together all the time. And, in those first couple of years with the expectations being so high, it's tough. Like, I was like, am I doing okay? Like, she'd so reassuring. We would just laugh and have fun. And I always kind of kept things on track. So with me being so focused, I was always like, well, we got to get this done and we can't forget about this. And let's add this in. And, so we just balanced each other perfectly. Honestly, the hardest part of leaving California was leaving that job because I was 3 years in and really felt like I was in a great rhythm, had a great partner, knew the families. I had been accepted by the families. So it was tough. That was the toughest part, but that wasn't going to keep us there. My measly salary was a joke. So
yeah, man, the hardest part for me was for sure leaving my students too.
Yeah.
And I had just gotten into right before COVID, I had finally fallen into a rhythm. So
Yeah.
I was doing one-on-one prep
Right.
for the SAT for like 12, 13 years. And then I was
Right.
so overbooked, I started this little classroom. And I thought the classroom would just be overflow people. But then
Right.
the classroom took on this life of its own. And that's like when
love
Matt
it.
Todd University was created.
Right.
And it was so beautiful. Like the students were starting to come back. I had rounds of alumni that would come back on their breaks and pick up new hoodies and like check in all the time. And I had an online program that was really awesome. And so there were all these things. I was like, this is it. I've done it. Like I have essentially made what every teacher has ever wanted,
Yes.
which is like this independent classroom with a good salary that and like
That's not what I was expecting you to say, but
well,
yes.
no, because what a lot of teachers have always dreamt of is like, I want autonomy.
Yes.
I want mastery.
Yes.
I want students who want to be there, and I want to be paid for this.
Yeah. Well, it's
Right?
environment. It's an environment. Like for me, I always wanted to create an environment where students wanted to be there, where I was comfortable, that I wanted to show up to every day, that everybody felt successful. They wanted to get up and come to school, right? I didn't want a kid to roll out of bed and not want to come to my class. Like, I wanted them, it was really important to me. So that's why the growth that I had was so great, because I was like, oh, I can be fun.
Right.
Like it took me a little while. But honestly, it was the public school that beat that into me, that we had to do it this way and we had to be serious all the time. It wasn't until I went to some place where people were paying you to be not like that,
Right.
that I really was like, oh, okay, I can be myself and I can have fun and we can joke around and, like the environment you created. And it was harder some years than others. It really depended on the kids. The last year I had when I was, the COVID year it was nearly impossible. I don't think I achieved what I wanted to achieve with that group of kids until probably April. Like it took all year. But they had come off of COVID. They had come off of 6 months of home by themselves, playing on their devices and not talking to each other, right? Not so their maturity was not there and the academic rigor had not gone anywhere. So it was tough.
And those types of kids, I saw this just absolutely heart-wrenching video from, there was this snafu in Napa like 6 months ago when I was going to interview one of the teachers, kind of at the center of it. I'm like, I can't do this.
Right.
It just got too
blame
heavy.
you.
But she had shared this video of these kids, and I think they were elementary kids. I think it was like third grade or something. And it was this little boy and this little girl, and they were cousins, and it was their first hug after COVID when they had been able to hug each other. And they were like smiling, and like everybody's like, "This is your first hug. Are you ready?" And they hadn't been able to hug each other for like a year and a half, and they give each other this hug, and all of a sudden it goes from like, "Oh, I'm happy," to like this third grader just bawling his eyes out, and you see it, and you realize that it. As horrible as this was for the teenagers, at least they could express a little bit like, "Hey, and they can also push back." Parents were constantly skirting this line of like, "Okay, I need to keep my kid safe, but my kid is a force to be reckoned with, and they're not. I'm going to have to work with them because they will not accept if I just say no." But for the little kids, they couldn't do anything about it, and they didn't have a voice, and again, that is so hard to see those kids struggle through that. And then to just see that they had no options. It was like, look, you're letting your 16-year-old fib a little bit.
Right.
Like you're letting your 18-year-old sneak out. You know this. Yeah. Like, what about the 9-year-old?
Right.
You know?
No, they were stuck right in the middle, right? Of understanding enough and not, like you say, not being able to communicate and understand their feelings. It was a really tough year. They came back and school wasn't what it was before. You know, they were all spread out from each other. They were all in masks, you know. I had 12 kids in the classroom and 6 kids on the screen, and I was teaching them simultaneously. All of those parents paying that $24,000. So it wasn't like I could do one thing or another. And it was tough for all of us, you know. We all just wanted normal, and we all just had to deal with it every day, you know. It was, I understand, and it's heartbreaking.
When you started, were you in public school? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So in 2001, okay, Joy starts teaching and go public. You know, you're going to change the world. You're going to, you know, you're like 20 years old and you're going to make this happen, right? And I'm sure they would super happy to have you, because teaching is, of course, the only profession where you value somebody who's just started more than somebody who's been there 20 years, right? So totally you're like backwards. This young teacher, and you're like, "I'm here. My name's Joy." You know, like you're like the shining girl from Inside Out, like with just dancing around in sunscreen.
Pretty much, yes.
Right, and then you have like the tenured teacher who's Sadness, and she's like,
totally. Oh gosh, yes.
So you start teaching in 2001 in public school. Cut to 21 years later, right? Like my original podcast in California became this real community advocacy thing, because I was trying to help get students the access to care and socialization that they needed, and the debates going back and forth between the teachers union and the district and the health department, or like nobody was really bringing them to the table and say like, come explain this to me. Anyway, so people bring me all of these issues now from back in Northern California, and I cannot tell you just how epically absurd public education has become. Because try this one on for size, okay?
Yes.
4th grader, so right up your alley, okay? 4th grade class from, I believe it's 8 to 10. It's like 8:15 to 10 o'clock or something like that. First period of the day.
Got it.
This mom gets online and is like, okay, well, first week of school, from 8:15 to 10, they spoke about identity for the entire first week. She was like 5 days straight, about 10 hours worth of identity talk. And I can guarantee you my student is now far more confused than my student has ever been.
Like gender and all that kind of stuff?
Gender identity, other people's gender identity, you know, like bathrooms. And she was like, but don't worry, if it wasn't beat into the kid from 8:15 to 10, another class went off on the same thing about like how you view other people's identity. This is the entire public school, the entire thing. And people naturally pile onto this and say like, well, this is ridiculous. This is not what public school is for. But not everyone says that.
Not everyone says that.
And
No.
they're like, well, this is far more relevant than what we learned when we were in school. And it blows my mind because, okay, first off, what did you learn?
Right.
I mean, because I think most people can relate to feeling like trigonometry was not really beneficial to them.
Right. Right.
But maybe not beneficial to them. Not beneficial to everyone.
Right.
Right? So, like, let's be clear. If you were a math person, you really liked learning trig, right? And if you were an art person, maybe not. But guess what? The math person didn't like art class either.
Right. And that's the beauty of school, right? Isn't it? Like, that's what I loved about teaching little kids, like, and having all those enrichments. Like, you would find what you were good at. The kids who kicked butt in math went to art and struggled, possibly, right? Or the kids that went to PE, did amazing, but maybe they struggled in reading. Like, it gave everybody a chance to shine at some point in their day. I don't know. The whole gender identity thing, like, I would have been fired if I had. I can't even relate to that because the private school, I mean, my principal would have been in my classroom in 30 seconds. Like, get out. Like, I can't even imagine that. And then back in my public school days, like, yeah, no, where I taught, we were focused on getting kids to speak English. It was a low performing school with a lot of English language learners. And that was the focus, was we have all of these kids that can't read or speak the language. So this is our job. And should still be, right? Like, I don't know why we spend that time.
I think we can say waste. I think we can say
I mean, I didn't have a minute to spare in any of my classrooms. A minute. Like, I would have, you don't want more time in the day, but sometimes you want more time in the day. You have stuff to cover. You have things to teach. You have projects to finish. You have books to read. You have math to do. Like, there's always something to do. I would have never, ever felt like I had time to talk about gender identity. Like, that's just not anything that would ever enter my mind. And to this day.
You were at the foundational part of education. Because say whatever you want for, like, the junior in high school. It's like the junior in high school pretty much has a lot of, like, maybe you're polishing up on U.S. history.
Right.
And, maybe you're trying to get one more cool year of science or something. But, like, after senior year in high school, I didn't take another science class. Right. I think I capped out at physio and anatomy. And I had taken 4 years of science, so I was happy with it. And I didn't go on to study science, so that was kind of it. But third and fourth grade, especially, you're dealing with those years where it's kind of like if you miss some stuff in third and fourth grade, that will absolutely haunt you, not only through the rest of your required, mandatory education, but that's really going to stick with you even into adulthood.
Oh, absolutely. There's a study that says that if they don't learn to read by the end of third grade, there's a good chance they won't learn to read. So it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. And you have to be on your game. And I think that's that pressure that I felt in public school was like, these kids, you get a mix of kids speaking all different languages and coming from all different backgrounds, but your job is to get them to read on grade level. Like, there's no fun. That's what I came from. And then I had to do, like, the 180. But, like, it'll keep you up at night. It used to keep me up at night. I used to take those kids home and worry and worry and worry. The other thing is that I came to teaching as a second career. So I cared so much. Like, when I found teaching and I realized that this is what I wanted to do and this is what I really, really cared about, like, I had a hard time turning it off for just the reasons that you're saying. Like, it is my job. Like, what I do will impact this kid for the rest of their life. And I don't take that lightly. So it was a little different at the private school because those kids, they didn't get past first grade if they didn't have the skills. Right. So, like, by the time I got them in fourth grade, there were kids that were behind and had work to do, but generally they were all could read and write and, were proficient. So
what was the emphasis then at your school? If it wasn't religious and it's not a public school, so people aren't going there to, for the Catholic or Christian education, but they didn't want to be in the public school. So, like, what was, and you were there really as during the ramp up of, like, let's start getting multiple bathrooms and let's really, like, this has been in the last 5 years. You were teaching at this expensive private school. Were people going to that to escape the nonsense in the
Yeah.
public school?
Not yet. We weren't there yet. This was 2007. Started in 2018. So we weren't there yet. But there was enough nonsense in the public school.
Like
there was.
what in particular were people escaping?
There was, like, let's just take middle school, for example. There was drugs. There was vaping. There was, fights. There was just a lack of structure and a lack of academic focus. What my school provided was academic focus. The kids, like, first of all, you had to test into it. You had to be at a certain level, academic level, to be able to come in. And so it was academic rigor. And so, and what my job was as a fourth grade teacher to begin the rigor in fourth grade, like grades and homework and everything began ramping up. And it was really tough, because it wasn't the easy fun that they had in third grade. Like we were really working, and we had a very difficult math curriculum that a lot of kids struggled with. And we had a lot of, I think every parent that I taught fourth grade was upset with, at some point, with the program or with just the learning curve, and seeing their kid have to struggle and figure it out, which is by design. But, when you're paying all that money, you don't want to see your kids struggle. You don't want to see them spend a lot of time on homework. You want to see a certain way. So it was a big year because parents would come and complain and be like, well, this is what this is. This is an academic rigorous school. And what's interesting is that my older daughter went in as a sixth grader, and she had just kind of been to some private schools, but nothing super academic. And she could tell the difference between the kids who were new in sixth grade and the kids that had been there since kindergarten. The students that had been there since kindergarten were much more prepared. Just kind of took it all in stride because they were used to it. So,
yeah, I think when I went to Cal, I had been in the public school, and not a very good public school, like
right?
A trash public school in the East Bay, and it actually ranked. Interestingly enough, my sister ended up doing a master's at one point in education, and our high school in Northern California ranked lower academically than the worst high school in Compton. Which is amazing because you're like, wait, how's that possible?
And this was based on test scores?
This was based on a number of factors, but one very key one was how they determine college readiness. So they figured out from the highest socioeconomic group at my high school. So let's say there were like all Caucasian students, right?
Right.
From the highest socioeconomic group at my high school, you had an 8% college readiness rating. Now, that's not every student at my high school, because my high school was very Hispanic. I think at the time I was like 53% Hispanic.
Right.
I was one of those. And you saw that it was like, okay, even amongst the best kids, statistically, they're just falling flat on their face. And so I graduated, and I essentially went through all the top classes with like 30 kids.
Right.
And it was a class of something like 400 or 500. So it was around 7 or 8% of my grade level went to, like honors chem. We ended up in calculus. We ended up in, honors English, things like that. So we all just kind of jumped to the same classes. And even of those kids, like easily half of them ended up going to a JC and never finishing, or just not really making it at all. Like, and some of them went to like, Humboldt State or something. Nothing crazy, but the ability for people to transition effectively was really hampered. So I ended up going to Cal, and there are a few other people that end up going to Cal as well. And almost instantaneously, all of us were on academic probation because we just got wrecked against the students, and we weren't even underperforming compared to what we were used to. But the other students there were like, "Oh yeah, I'll stay up all night long, and by the way, I'm really smart."
Right?
And you're like, "Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Where am I? What's happening?"
It was really a shock. And so this is actually one of my big criticisms of, the emphasis that people have now towards pushing social ideologies onto college acceptance. Right. So like we don't have affirmative action proper.
Right. Right.
But we have affirmative action.
We absolutely
it's
do.
just not the letter of the law. Right?
It's so subjective, right?
Right. It literally comes down to what the admissions officer feels like that day, how much sympathy that person feels. They're like, well.
Or maybe their political ideology could play into it as well, right?
Right.
I mean, like, you don't know. We're going through that right now with my oldest, and it's like, can you really be honest about who you are in these essays? Can you really be honest about? I don't know. I've yet to answer that question. I mean, even the simplest thing on the Common App is like, why did you change schools? You know, from California to Idaho. Ooh, wow, really?
We moved.
Yeah, no, she figured it out. She's just put for personal reasons. You know, like, none of your business, because I don't trust you. I don't trust the person reading this to really know the truth behind it, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it's a weird time. It's a weird time.
It's a weird time
to be applying to college. Yeah, we're getting through it, but it's it's not easy.
So one interesting thing that I'm blown away by. So again, I was an SAT tutor. So take this for whatever you want, right? But I've always believed in tests. Okay.
Yes, right.
Because I come from an athletic background, I come from an academic background, right? And mind you, the only reason I got into Cal is because I scored perfect on part of the SAT. Wow. So it was like, and I, again, coming from a trash high school, I didn't have any tutors. I didn't open a single book. I had no idea what the test looked like. But I knew, I was like, it's game time, son.
Right.
Because my
this
GPA,
matters.
this matters. And I knew my GPA no matter what. It's like, well, look, the problem is if you don't go to a great high school, even if I had a 4.0 GPA, they're like, well, that's a 4.0 from that trash high school, right? So I knew, I was like, the only thing that's going to save me here is this standardized test, right? So I crushed the standardized test and was admitted to Cal. So thank God for that.
Right.
But eliminating that in the name of helping minorities is one of those things where you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Because, by the way, as a minority, right, like my grandparents both came from Mexico. My dad's 100% Mexican. I'm 50%. And my dad, by the way, is a physician and also crushed standardized tests after he came back from Vietnam, right? Like, if you eliminate the standardized test, then you just land on grades. And I'm sure you can attest to the fact that, especially within private schools and with well-heeled parents, you have stellar grades because you were able to get additional resources starting from a very young age, right? And you're likely going to better schools where GPAs hold more weight, right? So we have that, and that all favors people from a higher socioeconomic status.
Absolutely.
And on top of that, you have the last piece, which is, for instance, essays. Right. So you're writing these essays about what? Right? I don't know, whatever it is.
Whatever.
Well, odds are people coming from better high schools have more guidance. They have auxiliary help with them, right? Like, this is a really important piece. You have an essay coach. Like, I've helped people with hundreds of essays, right? And your parents know how to read and write, right? So, like, every metric of college admissions comes back to, well, of course it's not fair. Resources. Of course it's not fair.
It's the same thing in fourth grade. The kids that succeeded in fourth grade or third grade were the ones that had some parent support, went to bed on time, ate breakfast before they came to school, you know, like, had the resources. I mean, in addition to the $24,000 that we were charging, if a student was struggling, it's like, oh, well, there's tutoring for $100 an hour. Like, and parents would pay it, you know, like, those kids they would not let them fall down. So yeah, no, it all comes down to resources. Success in school, that's what it is. I personally, I have kind of mixed feelings on taking the SAT away because I did not get a perfect score on my SAT. But
I think you've turned out all right.
I did okay.
I think you're okay.
But what happens is, like, I think all those things you mentioned show a strength and a weakness. Like, you're going to kind of fall down somewhere. Either your essay is going to be subpar or your grades are subpar, but maybe you have great SAT scores. You can tell kind of a lot about a kid based on which one of those areas is, you know, their weakest point, right? I think that all of those pieces should go together in the admissions process, right? And I don't think, like, I think it would be great if we, like, you know, a weak test taker could do better. But, like, for me, we'll take my daughter, for example, right? She did not put a lot of effort into the SAT test, as I told you, into her preparation. And her score reflected that. She didn't do horribly, but she definitely didn't do as well as she wanted to. But AP tests, she's crushing those because she can prepare and she just knows what she needs to do. She's covered all the material. She's learned it. She can go and get a great score. Same thing with, her grades. She's taught the material. She can absorb it. She can review it. Go. She'll say herself that she does have a little bit of a photographic memory, so that helps her a lot too. But something as, overwhelming and sort of gray as the SAT test, she's just like, no, it's too big. I'm overwhelmed. I'm not going to do it. Nobody's taught it to me. I have to go figure it out myself. Like, it's too much. I'm not going to do it. So that says a lot about her, right? Like, teach her the information and she'll do great. Go take this test that's sort of random. Maybe it's not to you, but to her it felt that way.
Sure.
She's going to be like, she's not going to perform as well. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think you can tell a lot by keeping all those metrics there, right? When you pull one of those away, it's not benefiting the kids like you, who that's your strength.
Right.
Right?
Right. And not only that, what's the value of, one of the arguments for taking away the SAT was, okay, well, we have the AP tests, which will show us both. It's like, you realize that's another standardized test.
Right.
Right. And now only the people who have access to that particular class can even take it. Right. Like if you don't have AP bio, like I didn't have AP bio in my high school.
Right.
I couldn't have even taken it. I mean, I would have had to do some kind of massive additional preparation, which I was at 16. That wasn't me. Right now, fine. But then it's like I couldn't have gotten myself to do that.
And there's so much subjectivity even in the AP test, because I'm telling you, when my older daughter took the AP class at the private school, she kicked butt, like was prepared. She was ready. She did those SAQs and all that stuff. She could do that in her sleep. And then she came here and she's got AP classes at public school. She wasn't prepared. She is stressed out the week before the AP test because she hadn't had the teaching. She hadn't had the instruction. She had better teaching, at the private school because we weren't paying that money because I taught there. So we got but $24,000 worth of education to get her ready. Right. I think she told me on the first day of school here at Eagle High, her teacher said, oh yeah, I think it was AP history. And her teacher said, U.S. history. And her teacher said, yeah, most of my students, get a 3 on the test. She just about fell out of her chair, right? She's like, she had just gotten a 5, on her AP Euro test. So she's just like, wait a minute, like, you teach to that level? Like, you teach to a 3? So she had to do extra work outside of what was happening in class to get her to that. So that, that's tough, right?
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, I think what you're comparing is expensive private option, with a selective student base. Yeah. 2, we take everyone and I'm going to make the best. So to hear like, okay, the majority of people get a 3, when you have to accept everybody into it. That's fair. That to me seems more of an overperformance than like, I'm going to cherry pick the best students and then I'm going to get all the best students together and then I'm going to be able to teach really quickly and really in depth. Right. Because I have, this is kind of my criticism of charter schools in general. Okay. Now, I'm not all against charter schools completely. I think they have their place in academics for sure. But you can't tout the success of a charter school or even a charter school system as the solution to the problem of all academics because the charter school is doing well. Right. Because that charter school can select who it takes. People can apply and you can deal with admissions in any way. Even sometimes you have, like you're saying, like you talked about, a test or something to get in. Sometimes it's a lottery, right? But even with the lottery, you can still be removed from the school. So how difficult is it to remove the average student from the average high school? Well, it's extremely difficult, right? But for a charter school, it's not. And students will self-select as well. Right. So say the charter school requires an enormous amount and way more than the average public school. And people know that. Right. Well, then that's an important thing to take into consideration.
Absolutely. Then back to the resources, right? If you have the resources to go, and the awareness as a parent to go sign your child up for charter school because you want them to have that education, you're going to make sure that they succeed there, right? So you're going to make sure they do their homework. You're going to make sure they have what they need. They're going to go to bed on time, blah, blah. Those kids are set up differently than, like you say, a public school classroom where there's most of the kids don't have those resources at home.
Right. I missed, I could have taken the AP test for math, but I ended up missing the registration because my parents didn't care at all. Like I paid for the SAT test with my paper route money. And, took it.
Amazing.
I took it. But the point is you cannot discount the disparity in lifestyle and familial support from one. So, I was a swimmer. Okay. I did 3 sports growing up. I was swimming, water poloing, and wrestling. And, and I kind of like, I'll be honest, I got like a little butthurt sometimes because in tutoring, I'd meet all these phenomenal athletes, and I love these students. I'm like, damn, dude, you are so fast. Last time I swam competitively, I was 18, right? So I'm sure as a grown man, like I could swim fast now. But I meet these students like, dude, how much do you swim? They're like, I swim like 8-9 practices a week. And like, that's a lot of swimming. Right. And now as a parent, I realize, I'm like, oh my God. So your parent was driving you from 6th grade, 3 mornings a week, right, to like 5 a.m. practice. Right. Yeah. And then again after school every single day. And then on Saturday. Right. So you're getting nine training sessions in. Right. And you have like this unbelievable protein powder, like these recovery drinks, pre-workouts, like they're dumping hundreds of dollars, just pumping you full of chemicals, supplemental chemicals on top of the. And I was thinking back, it was like, man, there was one day I'm captain of the swim team in high school, right? One day I'm dragging, and my coach grabs me. He's like, "What's wrong with you? What's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't have lunch." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I didn't have lunch." So he grabs me out of the pool and like gives me this apple, but. And I eat this apple and I jump back in the pool and I swim. But comparing myself where it's like, okay, I don't know what I had for breakfast that day. Probably nothing. Right. Or an egg. And then I go to school. I go to school all day long. I don't have anything else to eat. And then I go to practice at like 4:00 and I'm supposed to, swim as fast as I can. It's like, well, of course. Right. Of course you don't have the resources and of course you're not going to be swimming as quickly, as the other people. Like your scores your times aren't going to be that fast. But again, like you're saying, it's lifestyle, right? It's like, what are the parents providing everything, and let's just focus on academics, for academic success. Right. And I guarantee you my academics were affected by the fact that I was dragging, tired and just. Oh, yeah.
Well, in your case, or, in the case of many kids, it's academics and athletics, right? And as a parent, you're supporting both of those. And then you got multiple kids in academics and athletics, right? So it's just like, that's all you're doing is pumping out resources, Like,
if you want to be.
Yeah. One of my questions I ask my girls 100 times a day is, did you eat? Did you eat? Did you eat? Because it's like the same reasons. Like, you're pushing yourself so hard. You better make sure you sit down and eat a meal, But, that's what it comes down to.
So,
and I feel the same way. Sorry to interrupt you. But, please. Like, as far as being butthurt, like, I'm giving my girls 1,000 times more than I ever had. Are you kidding me? Like, sometimes, like, I was just talking to my youngest going into high school. I'm like, you're on the soccer team, as a freshman? Like, that's pretty kick-ass. Your sister's going to drive you to school. That's cool. Like, you have friends because you went to the public school here in town last year. Like, you're already miles ahead of where I was going into high school, right? Like, wow, you don't have it so bad. So I do get a little butthurt too. Like, you don't even know how good you have it.
God, it's painful to think about that. It really frustrates me sometimes too. Like, and I try to be the bigger man. I am a man, and like, these are 16-year-olds.
Totally.
It blows. I mean, it really blows me away because then I get frustrated. So, for instance, I go to Cal, okay, and I have this buddy Rob, who I think actually lives in Idaho somewhere. He was an early adopter. He moved here a while ago.
Smart guy.
Anyway, yeah. So he was from Seattle. He went to Lake Forest or something. There was a really, really good high school, and both his parents were. His dad was an attorney. His mom was a doctor, and they, not good people.
Yeah.
Good people,
no, right. I gotcha.
Savagely dumped resources. Apparently, he gets this Nintendo when he's a kid. Right. Never had game consoles. So he gets to college and he's very excited about Xbox because he had never had So he gets a Nintendo when he's a kid, and I guess he's 10, and I remember him telling me this. So I guess before school on like some random day, his dad catches him playing Nintendo. Right? And so his dad doesn't even say anything. He picks up the Nintendo console, throws it through the wall, and just walks out of the room. And Rob's literally standing there,
Still holding
the controller. Like, doesn't he? And so Rob never, like, he read like crazy, you know, growing up. And he went to this.
And it was gone forever.
The Nintendo never came back. Yeah. And they would like read as a family. Like they wouldn't even watch TV sitting. And Rob was at one point a ski racer. So his dad would, they decided, he was like, I want to be into ski racing. They're like, okay, Rob. So they start getting him private lessons and they get him like these awesome skis and all this other stuff, right? And so Rob goes to this high school that has something like 15 people in his senior class. And they all they don't even have the 5.0 scale. Every class they took was presumed to be an AP class. So they would just go and take casually the AP test and get 4s and 5s on them. So he was going to this just unbelievable high school. And then he goes to Cal and he absolutely demolishes it as long as he was working, right? Because that was his thing. He's like, this is so dumb. I don't really want to, I'm not going to put the effort into it. And unbelievable the disparity between him and me. Here I'm scrambling. I don't have the discipline. I don't have the intellectual capacity at the time. Like I wasn't trained well enough at the time to compete. And again,
but you're a success story. So what's the, like why isn't that the case for everybody who doesn't have the resources? Right?
Well, people are just different.
Yeah. That's the thing is like you worry so much about those kids that don't, like for me as a teacher, right? Back to 3rd grade and reading by the end of the year. Okay. Like you worry about those kids that don't have the resources that, you know, are going to bed at who knows what hour or whatever, coming to school not eating, just the whole thing. But it's like, most of those kids don't go to Cal. Like, what's the difference, do you think?
Okay, so did you know that there were 2 parties traveling with the Donner Party?
Yeah, I actually did know that. But yes, but
we know about the Donner Party.
Yes.
Right, why? Because the other parties made it through the same storm and got to the other side. And they actually sent help back to the Donner Party. Right. So, like, the Donner Party is always heralded as this, like, real commitment to survival and, like, what people had to go through.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, they had to go through that because they didn't push through when they needed to and they got stuck.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking bad about the Donner Party. Like, they ate each other. Like, obviously, they kicked some serious ass. Like, you had to want, you know, I remember my dad worked at John Muir. John Muir was this community hospital in California. And there was a statue of this guy with a peg leg, right? And it was one of the early explorers in that area, in like the East Bay, California. It was like back in the 1850s, like there was nothing there, you know? And there were like the golden bear is the state symbol, right? And there are no more golden bears because they were so ferocious. They would just like rip the gold miners to shreds. So they ended up killing off all of the golden bears.
Gotcha.
Right? So it was this really wild, crazy place up in Northern California, like in the Rockies and stuff. Anyway, so this guy, I asked my dad, I'm like, what's up with a peg leg? And it was like Peg Leg Smith or something.
Right.
So it was this early explorer who got injured and he cut off his own leg, fashioned a peg, and kept on with it.
Right.
And I remember talking to my dad about this driving in his car, and he was like, you know, you really have to want to survive in order to do that.
Yeah.
And it struck me, it was like, you have to want to survive. Because, you know, at 12, you don't really understand, like, what do you mean? Of course you want to survive. But now as an adult, it's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to survive that bad.
Right.
Like, I don't know if I'm that tough.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I think that's a lot of what it comes down to. Like, luck was a huge factor in me making it, 100%. Natural ability was a huge factor, right? Because you have to be smart enough, right? And you have to be lucky enough.
Right.
But then at the end of the day, I think it comes down to who you are too, which is like, how hard can you grit your teeth?
Yeah.
Like, how terrible can your life become and you respond accordingly before you give up?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, my current situation shows that, right? Like, I'll just talk about my cancer diagnosis when we got here. Like, it'll be a year on September 17th. And yeah, everything you said, I just lived through it. Like, you've got to decide what your outlook is. You've got to decide how you're going to handle it. You've got to decide whether or not you really want to do this. And then you do it. And there's no, like you said, there's no turning back. It's not like, oh yeah, well, this is hard. I think I'll just explore the alternative. It's like, no, you've got to wake up every day and decide that you're going to kick butt.
You want to live.
You want to live. Yeah.
You want to make it through today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had been through, I think, like you, enough crap in my life up to that diagnosis where it was like, this is what I do. This is what's got to be done. I've done this before. I'll do it again. Here we go. And I think that resiliency is really what it comes down to, right? You're going to have to work harder without those resources, but you're going to be more resilient, right? And then if you have all the resources like your friend, do you have the resiliency to face something hard as an adult? Hopefully, right?
Well, even within college,
yeah.
he had a jump start on pretty much everyone. There were a couple kids like him who came from really, really high-end schools. Another kid, my dear friend, Max, went to a CPS, College Preparatory School, which is in Oakland, very, very high-end school. Mm-hmm. And they had absolutely head starts on me right out of the blocks.
Right.
But even before we graduated college, it was like the tide turned about halfway through where like I was always scrappy, but I was starting behind and they had a leg up and were not nearly as scrappy.
Right.
And so then about junior year, it was like this inflection point.
Right.
Where it was like, oh, now I have a 3.9 and you don't.
Right.
Right. Or like.
Well, like when it got hard, could they hang? Right.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, as hard as it was to move here with our oldest being a junior and the tough year that she had last year, she had to fall down and get back up. And she hadn't really experienced that. She hadn't fallen down. She had just sailed through her classes and everything had come easy for her. And it was a big year for her. She had to figure it out. But thankfully she had a lot of little fall down and get back up moments. There had been things that she had done along the way where we had pushed her and pushed her and pushed her, even though she wanted to stay in her comfort zone. So I feel like as parents, we had kind of adequately prepared her for the big fall down, right? So I guess it really just comes down to like providing the resources, but then also providing the opportunity to be resilient.
Right.
I think that's how you produce the most successful, right? Quote unquote, adults or individuals.
Right. The aspect of allowing for people always talk about like you got to let your kids fail, right? But they don't really follow it up with a lot of like it was never properly explained to me.
Yeah.
As a younger person, like, yeah, how about you don't let me fail? Like, how about you help me get the gold?
Right. I really liked to be good.
Because like, oh my God, I mean, in wrestling, man, like wrestling always really, really. I had a lot of anxiety around it because it's just such this horrendous experience where like somebody's just trying to maul you. And it's like a 16-year-old, it was really stressful for me. And it's like, how about you just help me know everything I need to know? To the whole point that I learned later on of allowing people to fail isn't even so that like within a wrestling platform, right? It's like I'm bad, and then I'm really good at wrestling. And look at me, bully me, I'm good at wrestling. Right. I actually learned later in life that it's like, okay, look, you don't actually care about wrestling. That's the point. Like wrestling is meaningless. So's swimming, so's water polo, so's rowing. I rowed in college and do jujitsu and like all of those things are meaningless, right? The real important thing is that you engage in things that you're horrendous at and really bad at.
Yes.
And you start from zero and you learn how to go up, right? And keep building on it as pathetic as you are at the onset. Because it's my understanding that the people that have read these wonderful interviews on like hyper successful people, and overwhelmingly their emphasis is like, oh yeah, I had no idea what I was doing. Right. But like I kept doing it.
And I figured it out.
And like over and over and over. That was their MO, which is like, oh yeah, I have no idea what's going on. But like I'm going to keep trying to figure out what's going on over and over and over, because you don't want success in one metric. You don't want success just in wrestling. You want to be the type of person who can engage in something they're horrible at a whim and find the ability to develop success through this really painstaking process.
Yes.
And to me, that's the whole benefit of letting your kids fail, which is like, because you're teaching them the process of failure leads to success in all games.
Exactly.
Athletic and otherwise.
Right. Right. And even in dealing with people or, right, social interactions or all of that stuff. And anything that feels hard, you just got to keep at it. Sort of a funny story is that when you're talking about going into things and not knowing what you're doing, I came to teaching as a second job. So my first job, I was completely lost as a high schooler. Like I had no idea what I wanted to do.
You didn't know what you were going to do with your life?
I had no idea.
As a high school student.
I was just a pleaser.
Surprise.
I did what everybody told me to do. I just didn't want to cause any problems or make anybody mad. And so my parents had me apply to Cal Poly, which was in San Luis Obispo. And my grades were okay. I had moved around a ton as a kid, so I never got like a true good academic foundation. I was fairly smart, but I never really was a top achiever. Anyway, and they said, go major in agriculture. That's how you get into Cal Poly. That it's a lot easier to get in. Well, I didn't know the first thing about agriculture other than I lived in a town that grew vegetables. And so I said, okay, fine, whatever. This is what you want me to do. This is what I did. So I majored in agricultural business, and I got through the whole program, not really knowing much about it. I was with all these kids that were, farmers. Their parents were farmers and, ranchers, and they grew all these things, and I drove these tractors, and I was just this...
I'm Joy.
I'm just here. So I made it through, learned a ton, worked in the industry for a couple of years, and hated every minute of it. But again, I didn't know myself. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just completely lost. And my sister came to me one day, and she was finishing at Cal Poly, and she said, hey, let's go get our teaching credentials. I'm finishing. I'm going to go on. Do you want to go with me? I didn't even hesitate. I said, yes, I can be a teacher.
God, yes.
It's got to be better than what I'm doing. And so, And so I quit my job, and I started substitute teaching. No student teaching experience. No, I hadn't even started the credential program. I just needed to work. Right? So I was like, okay, I had a job. I need a job. I need a sub. I walked into this one school. I think it was fifth graders. Again, I'm 22 maybe. And I walk in. I have not been in a classroom since I was a fifth grader, pretty much. And I remember the look of horror on the principal's face when she said, oh, are you in a teaching program? No. Have you done any student teaching? No.
Nope.
No, I just sold a load of broccoli 2 weeks ago. I want to try this. Yeah. And and I did it. I walked in, and I was probably not very successful, but I figured it out. And I figured out real quick, like, okay, this is what I need to do to be better. And that's the thing about teaching, right? You only have to do it for a couple minutes before you screw up and figure out, oh, yep, I can do that better next time.
Yeah, okay.
And then, yeah, and that's how I became a teacher. And then, I was just committed to making myself a little better every day, and just doing a better job the next time or the next class. And then I went right into the program and got my credential, and I was just so happy. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. This is what I was born to do. After all those years of being lost and all the, wasted a whole bunch of time in college learning about things that I'll never need again. But at least I found it. So.
Yeah, but again, that's the beautiful thing, right?
Right.
If you don't learn the process of okay, every day I'm going to make myself a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better.
Right.
Right. Like an inch forward in that way. If you don't learn that at a young age,
yeah,
you're not going to be nearly as successful in whatever you choose to do later in life. Right. We're not all going to be Jeff Bezoses. Most of us just kind of want to get on with our lives and provide a good life for our family and stuff. And you're going to need to be a little bit better.
Yeah.
And you gotta have that process down.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what I loved about teaching is I loved that you could have a terrible day. You could just feel like, wow, that was a bad day. I didn't do any good that day. But then you got another opportunity the next day, right? And it's what kept me going for a lot of years, and what made me miss it too, So
yeah. The teaching for me was always a little bittersweet because I would work with students for about 2.5 months for the SAT. We'd meet once a week. And it was always like, there were 9 classes, right? And it was always by class 7. The class had really gelled.
Yeah.
The quiet kids were like out of their shell.
Right.
They were all in. And like the, loud, boisterous kids from the get-go, like everybody was making fun of them and they were laughing like they could take jokes.
Right.
Everybody kind of understood how, and they'd come in, they're like, can I get a cup of noodle? And like a bunch of little Sour Patch Kids. I'm like, get it, dude. You want a mocha or something? They're like, yeah, let's load it up. Right.
Awesome.
But then it was over.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I only got 9 classes with them. And it was always so upsetting to me because I thought, like, gosh, wouldn't it be awesome if you could develop these great working relationships with people and actually see it through like a whole year?
Oh, yeah.
Like that would be, that'd be awesome. But
That's why they came back to you, because they liked it as much as you did. You know?
Yeah, and students would come back. I'd let them come back in for free, so they'd come back. Students would just come back and do like normal high school homework.
Right.
They're like, can I just come back to class? And they'd like sit in the corner. I set up other tables so they could hang out.
It's the best.
They get
that's
snacks
the
and
best.
stuff. Yeah, it was fun. So look, being that you taught in both public and private, and you've kind of seen this transition in priorities. What do you think needs to happen? Because I'm very impressed by the public schools here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, big fan.
Right.
And our boys were in private Catholic school back in California, and we were really worried about the public schools because we had very bad experiences there, and these were highly ranked, California public schools.
Right.
Trash.
Right.
But the public schools here, I have been very, very impressed with. Like, what do you think gripped the California public schools that's not gripping the Idaho public schools?
I'm going to be honest here, and I don't know, might not be a popular answer, but it comes down to language. I don't know if Idaho, I'm going to guess, and I'm just speaking off the top of my head here, but I'm going to guess that Idaho does not have the number of English language learners that California does. California has a tremendous amount of students that come into kindergarten knowing very little English. And that's where a lot of the resources go in public schools, is getting those kids to speak English. And really it's a lot of money, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort. And, schools have to they have lots of resource people on hand to make sure that all those needs get met, and that the parents get all the information they need in their home language, and that, there's just the communication is open. And I think that there's not enough money to make that happen the way it needs to happen. It's totally, obviously, a valid need. It needs to be addressed, but you need a ton of money to facilitate that massive of a challenge, right? I mean, imagine you're a kindergarten teacher and you've got 4 languages being spoken at home in your class of 25 kids, right? Other than English.
That would be tough.
It's really tough. It's an impossible task, especially given the fact that you have yourself and your textbooks, and that's what you have to get these kids reading and writing in English.
So you think the majority of drain that's pulling the California public schools down is that in early education, people are not educated properly enough as they come into kindergarten or TK or whatever it is?
Possibly. I mean, do you remember that program in California? It was called First Five, and California spent a ton of money getting young kids in preschool and developing their language and developing social skills and getting them ready for kindergarten in those first 5 years. I think that's a good start for sure. But yeah, it's just a massive challenge. And, there's so many kids that aren't getting their needs met, and they, aren't where they need to be academically. And then they become behavior problems and they don't learn. And, it's really a problem. And they may or may not be caught, so to speak, in the fact that they don't have those skills. I was teaching at a charter school in California. In the midst, I had a couple months in between my public in 2001 and my private, I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to go back to teaching. And I think I told you this story already, but I went to this charter school where I taught 8th graders. It was a complete disaster. They didn't like me and I didn't like them. So we didn't have the warm and fuzzy experience that you did with that age group. But anyway.
No. 8th graders are super snarky. They're almost impossible.
They were impossible. Were impossible. And but there was one girl that was desperately trying to be invisible. She did not want anybody to see her. And I saw her. And I wasn't even the teacher. I went in, was as an aide, because I was like, oh, I'll be I'll just help out. Just help out.
I don't want all the spotlight, just a little limelight.
However, the problem with that is that the teacher that I was teaching under had been teaching about 4 months. Okay. So I'm the more experienced one, getting paid, I think, $15 an hour, right, with these 8th graders, trying to support her, even though she's, green as can be, right? So it was quite an experience. But this one girl, I knew that something was off. I knew that she was working too hard to not do the work, that she was dodging. And I can't remember how I figured it out or what I did, but I figured out that she was in 8th grade geometry and she didn't know how to multiply. And I brought it to the attention of the teacher that I was working with. And she took it to the special ed or resource teacher. And they said that because it came from me, because I was the one who noticed it as the assistant teacher, and it didn't get noticed by the regular teacher, that girl was not going to get any services. She was not going to get any support.
Couldn't the teacher just fill out the same form?
She had already said, oh, Joy noticed. And the minute that she said, Joy noticed that this student is struggling with multiplication, can we get her some extra support? It was the most ridiculous thing.
God, the bureaucracy.
It's
unbelievable.
And it's just like, I think I quit shortly after that because I was like, why am I here? What am I doing? I can't do this, like, ethically. I can't be in this classroom and watch this girl just struggle and not do anything about it. I mean, I would have done it on the side for free if I could have, but I, didn't have the opportunity at that time. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff you're dealing with. It's sad. It's heartbreaking. So
yeah, the emphasis that I've seen with a lot of, I worked with this one girl who for the SAT, and this was a long time ago, and she had been in a charter school in 3rd and 4th grade, and it was this very California-style charter school. So it was like, we're going to learn math while we're counting bugs in the grass or something just dumb, right? And this poor girl, same kind of thing. Like, she missed the absolute bare bones fundamentals in like 3rd and 4th grade because she was out on a field.
Right.
And her parents thought that they were doing right by her by putting her in this charter school, and it had all these resources and these young teachers and this very progressive curriculum. And she never recovered. She never got those skills back. Like, she missed those 2 years, and then she re-entered the standard public school in 5th grade, and she was never, ever competent again. And here they were trying to get her to go to college. These were educated individuals. And
I can only imagine. Yeah, she wouldn't have it.
No, she wouldn't have it, and she never got it. And the thing that gets me is there's so much talk about reinventing education.
Right.
And my concern is always like, okay, how do you know what you're reinventing is going to be better? Right? And like, you can reinvent a lot of different things. Like, you could reinvent the sloppy Joe and like just kind of like, hey, this tastes good. And I feel I think people are coming down to like, well, look, how do people feel about education?
Right.
And using that as the barometer.
Right. Like emotions. Right.
How do you feel about today?
Right.
How do you feel about what you learned today? How do you feel about what has been going on? Like, do you feel good about this? And it's like, this person was pooping their pants like 4 years ago. I mean, can we? Like, you're still a person, but you're a 1st grade person. Like, I'm not going to ask you what you think about your education.
well,
Like,
it's
you
just-
don't even have the taste buds for this yet.
Yes,
Like,
no, it's back to the resiliency. It's like making this easier on them is not going to make them more successful individuals, right? Like if we keep adapting the school to be appropriate to how they feel, like what's going to happen when they don't like school?
right.
What's going to happen when they have to go to work and they don't like their job? Like, are they going to be, they're going to be like, well, this doesn't feel good. Who's going to fix this for me? Right? Right? Am I the only one who sees that?
No, that was actually always my answer for when am I ever going to use this. So
Right.
students always ask, like, when am I
Right.
ever
No,
going
I
to,
agree.
because we're like slogging through, trig or whatever,
Right.
or English grammar. They're like, nobody speaks like this. When am I ever going to use this? And my answer is always like, look, you may actually never use this, but you're going to use this skill set many times over, because you're
Right.
kidding yourself if you think that your actual profession will be centered around things that you, A, care about, and 2, are always best at.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
Like, you're going to have to learn things that you're bad at learning and you hate at the same time.
Exactly. And it's just like, me selling vegetables. Like I hated that, but
You're
I
still
wasn't.
slinging the broccoli.
Yeah, just like that. I wasn't. If I hadn't built up that like fall down, get up attitude, like I would have just sat there, paralyzed. Like, somebody help me. I don't like this. What do I do? Right? And I would have relied on other people to fix the problem for me, when ultimately it was up to me to figure out, like, I don't like this job. I need to do something different, and I need to figure out what I have to do to make it better. So yeah, no, I have a real problem with that. And just this weekend, my youngest made the soccer team at Eagle High, and she had to do some fundraising. She had to send out some emails and for asking for money. What they want her to do, right? They need money. And she fought me on it big time. Oh, I don't want to ask people for money. I don't want to write an email. I don't want to. Sat her down right next to me, opened the laptop, and I started to go into teacher mode of like, okay, this is what it needs to say. And then that wasn't going very well. So then I backed off and I said, okay, here's your assignment. You need to write this email. You need to include this information. Go. Sure enough, she pulls up a Google Doc. She starts making notes, little phrases, right, of things that she's heard her dad and I say to her and what needs to be in the email. Okay, then she opens up the email tab, takes her little notes, puts them into an email. Beautiful process, right? Beautiful process. And she figured it out herself. She had to walk through it herself. And then I proofread it and, fixed up a few things for her, and we were good to go. But it's like, not that it's like, oh, that was a perfect job by me, but it's like, I just apply the same principles. Like, I'm not going to do this for you. You're going to have to figure this out yourself. And yes, you have to do it. It's not optional. So I don't think there's enough of that these days.
I was actually going to ask that. Do you think that there's this classic kind of image of like the old maid teacher who's like cranky
Right.
and mean
Right.
and just,
Right.
you don't,
Right.
it's never an old dude teacher. It's always like some old cranky lady.
Seriously,
right?
another thing that we have to put up with. Circling back to the beginning of our conversation.
Well, I mean, it is kind of unfair. I will give you that. Like, my dad always, I remember my dad told me once, he's like, it's not really fair being a girl. I'm like, why, Dad? It doesn't seem that bad. And he's like, well, because we get to be Sean Connery and they,
Right.
who's the Sean Connery of
Right.
women?
Right. Depends on the day.
But you get to paint your face too.
Right.
Like, this is all I got for like a while. But
It's not
anyway,
all it's cracked up to be.
it's better than this. Anyway, so do you think that the image of like that old teacher who's just cranky and like won't do things for people it was so distasteful for a lot of people, right? Like even I had some of those teachers who were like, oh, this lady stinks. Like, she never helps me. And I'm not saying they were always right. Like, there are plenty of old cranky teachers that were just old and cranky and like not great. But like, could they have stumbled upon something that we actually need perhaps a little more of in public education, which is like, figure it out. You need to figure this out. Like, this is not meeting the standard, and I'm not here to, I've given you the information. Like, you're going to have to iron this one out.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely needs to be more of that. Absolutely. I mean, that's life. That's a life skill, right? Like, you hold their hand and do it for them, they're never going to figure out how to do anything on their own. So
That's probably true.
it made me very unpopular at times in my classroom. Like, I know there was a lot of angst around Mrs. Dvorak when I was teaching. I'm sure I would not want to be a fly on the wall in some of the homework sessions. But I always told my students, like, if we were done a particularly hard math lesson, I would say, like, okay, now's the time to look at your homework, to hand out the homework, look over the homework. And I'd make them give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Do you understand your homework? Do you feel like you can go home and do each one of these problems by yourself without the help of your parents? Take a minute. And then they would have to, now's the time, ask a question. Is there something you don't understand? Now's the time. And, I'd have to get a whole classroom full of thumbs up. I'd actually give them the time to look at it. And then when a parent called me and said, so doesn't understand their homework, it was like, really? Because I gave them 5 minutes in class today to look over the homework and ask a question and make sure they could do it on their own. So that always, and they'd be surprised to know that, they looked at the homework before you sent it up. Well, yeah, because we did it in class,
Kids are squirrely, man.
Bunch of liars. But
bunch of liars.
You gotta like catch them in their own shortcuts, right?
Yeah. What do you feel like having high schoolers at Eagle High? What do you feel like the level of parental input is compared to schools in California? Because sometimes people want a lot of input, and then sometimes people are like, whatever, I'm just hands off, I do whatever. Like, do you think the school is like welcoming to that, or do you think they check you at times? Because sometimes it's too much. It's like, look,
right.
lady, I appreciate that you have an opinion, but I
right.
wasn't asking.
No, and we've been completely hands off at Eagle High. Like, we did have one very positive interaction with the principal last year. My eldest was in a bullying situation, which she waited way too long to tell us about, but she had a boy in her class who was straight up harassing her, called her some nasty names. And we went right to the principal with it. And the very interesting thing about dealing with that at public school was that it was actually handled better at public school than it would have been at her private school. And the reason is that the boy who was calling her the names was able to be brought in and talked to by the principal. His parents were called by the principal for what was going on in her class. The teacher was brought in and also talked to about all this that was going on in her, I think it was her debate class. And there were multiple people involved to try to get to the root of the problem. Most importantly, the boy and the parents of the boy. At the private school, that wouldn't have happened. They would have not called the parents of the boy, because that boy's parents also pay $24,000 a year. And they don't want to be told that their son is being accused of harassing a girl in debate class. So it would have just been handled with us as her parents and her and potentially the boy, and that's it. Like, this was a very comprehensive approach to let's really solve the problem. And there will be a consequence next time. So it was absolutely refreshing. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but absolutely like a refreshing approach to like, oh, wow, this was really taken care of, And the issue of retaliation was addressed by the principal with that boy. Like, don't you even think about retaliating because she's, gone to me with this. Like,
did the boy admit that he was being a shithead?
Mm-hmm.
Did he have any reason why?
I don't.
Not that any reason would justify it. I'm just curious. Like, was he just like a screw loose? Like, just
there may have been
there
may have been just an element of attention that he was trying to get from her, potentially. I mean, that's what I think. I was kind of like, well, he was just, playful, just kind of playing around, maybe borderline flirting, but
a total dick about
line.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I'm
like I said at the beginning, guys are really dumb. They're like, look at me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, I don't know. To be honest, I have no idea what his motivation was for treating her that way. But yeah, it was handled. We were very happy with how it was handled. The other thing is Eagle High has a principal for each grade level. They've got a freshman principal, a sophomore principal, junior and a senior principal. So they're able to address the needs of that specific group of kids, and they handle all the discipline and anything that goes on. Parents go right to that principal. And then of course there's one who oversees all of those. So, in a school of 2,000 kids, it seems to be necessary.
Right. That's beautiful to hear, by the way.
Yeah,
Not that
it's
your daughter
fantastic.
had to go through that,
Right.
but like you're going to have conflicts between
Right.
kids. That's
Right.
just the way it's going to go.
Right.
But like, for instance, we left the public school in California, elementary school, because my oldest was going through these really bad experiences, some
Right.
of which we observed firsthand. We're like, is
Right.
nobody
Yeah.
going to do anything about this? Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, not inconsequential stuff.
Right.
And in the final straw was actually, so he's in first grade and he's playing on the playground. And there was this one dude who he just had it out for him. He was like, So this kid is swinging on the monkey bars and kicks my son in the head. And he kicks him in the head so hard. And the yard duty woman, the adult there, felt that it was malicious and intentional. So that they brought the kids to the office, called the other kids' parents, were like, we're going to suspend him. Like, this is terrible.
Right.
This whole thing, right?
Right.
And they calmed down my son, which was great. And then he comes home.
Right.
And then about 30 minutes before I'm leaving for work to go tutor people, the mom and the son show up at my door with an apology letter.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay,
Right.
come in. Awesome. What's the apology letter for? Because the school did all this, but they were afraid to call us because they didn't want to be responsible for doing like a concussion kit. And they didn't. So they did all of these things and did not inform the parents of the kid who got kicked in the face, right? Didn't tell us like, hey, he got a head thing. And,
Right. You
know,
just
like,
saw it because you were there.
No, we never knew. We didn't know until the mom and the kid showed up. The other adult who was not related to my son at all was like, got you. That's terrible. Straight to the office. Oh my gosh, kid, are you all right?
Right,
You're
right.
like, the other adults were concerned about it. But
Right.
the school was so apathetic and so squirrely that they didn't want to deal
Right.
with any of the liability. So they're like, hopefully this just goes away. And so of course,
Kind of the opposite of-
the second I find out about this, of like, oh my God, I'm going to school right now. Like I'll be
Right.
late to work.
Right.
So I fire off to the school. Principal's gone for the day.
course.
She escaped
Right.
really fast. And then when I finally got a hold of her the next day and sat down with her, she's like, well, look, we have a lot going on at school. I'm like, you got a kid kicked in the head.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
don't even think it's relevant to let the parents know
Right.
about
Right.
this. So for me, knowing that at the high school level, they addressed it with actual competence and leadership, it's a beautiful thing. It's almost like people are so afraid of liability in California, and they're so afraid of getting in trouble. They're so afraid of,
Yeah.
social media picking something up, that they don't have the guts to actually do what you have to do to lead children.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's similar story, not similar story, but part of on our way out of California, about a month before we left California, my youngest was a 7th grader. And she was getting bullied because we were moving to Idaho. In California, somebody who moved to Idaho was transphobic. That's what they were labeled as. So she was labeled as transphobic because she had said we were moving to Idaho. And the sad thing was that she told us that before. She said, I don't want to tell any of my friends. I don't want to tell them that I'm moving to Idaho because they'll call me a name. We were like, what are you talking about? This went on for a while. And there was this one girl who would scoff at her every time she would mention moving. And probably the last couple of weeks right before we moved, she was on a Zoom and there were boxes in the background, clear to everyone in her Zoom classroom that we were moving. And this girl said something inappropriate to Charlotte and to my daughter, and she texted this girl and said, I don't like it that you do that. And this girl fired back with the nastiest response of like, where you're going to a transphobic place and nobody's going to like you and you're not going to make any friends. And, it was terrible. And
she's like 12 or 13 at the
yeah,
time, right?
12 or 13. And then she says that she's supposed to be calling her by her other name because she's identifying as the other gender. And why don't you ever call me this other name? Because, you're not respecting me. Right? So my daughter's just completely, upside down, doesn't know what to think of this, right? This is all confusing. And she's like, I told you this was going to happen. So I reached out to the parent trying to solve this. I said, you should really read this text string between the two of, our daughters. It's really concerning. And she ends up calling me that night, and she says, oh, well, my daughter's just very politically savvy. And she's just very aware of, social injustice, something to that effect. And she's willing to apologize to your daughter, but she wants another friend on the phone. So, she's trying to find another friend that, she can bring in to do this apology. And I was like, what? No. This just needs to be shut down. And so I took matters into my own hands, and I emailed the middle school teachers and copied the text string and said, this is what we're dealing with. And then I got on a Zoom call later, a couple days later, with the principal, a couple of teachers, and my daughter and the other child, all on a Zoom call together. And of course, my husband and I are sitting, in the background, trying to be calm, which was really challenging because the girls are telling their sides of the story, and my daughter starts with, well, I did overreact a little bit, with the initial conversation, and, kind of took ownership of her part. But I really am upset that I can't talk about where I'm moving to without getting a reaction from this other student. And then they say, okay, well, thanks for sharing. And then they go to the other student, and she says, well, I'm just upset because I was just outed by the other student's mom in that email. So when I sent the email to the middle school team and her mom, they didn't know that she was wanting to be called a different name. They didn't know that she was identifying as another gender. So I outed her to the teachers and to her parents. And then
that's her assertion anyway.
Mm-hmm, okay. Exactly. And then that became the meeting. That's what the meeting became about.
That's the entire meeting.
Yeah.
Look at me.
Yeah. Yep. That was it. And then the dead silence from the administrator and the teachers. Complete, it was like they were locked. They could not move forward with addressing this need. And so they listened to her story, and then they go back to my daughter and they say, well, are you, comfortable talking to this student on the phone? And my daughter says, no, I haven't received an apology. I don't trust that she's going to, understand my situation, and, just the whole thing. So
right. And it's like, look, perhaps you were outed, right?
Yeah.
And that's an upsetting thing for you.
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and put a pin in that.
Right.
And we're going to come back to that in a second. But first, we have the issue with you being a human being
exactly.
and acting in a non-appropriate way.
Yes, exactly.
Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we have certain behavior that is acceptable and not acceptable, regardless of your identification.
Right.
So we'll get to that. How about you say sorry first?
Yeah, exactly. No, that did not happen.
Whatever you want.
That did not happen. There was no apology. And then it was, of course, right before spring break. And it was like, oh, we'll revisit this when we get back from spring break. Nope. Didn't happen. And I think they kind of felt like, well, the Dvoraks are on their way out anyway. So, whatever. It was just, my daughter's feelings were never addressed. Consequently, this other girl went to the mutual group of friends that they had and started a cancel group to cancel my daughter, and they named the text group after that. Canceled the Dvorak daughter. Mm-hmm. And so
what did they talk about? They're like, let's
cancel
cayenne pepper in her sandwich today. What are they doing?
They kicked her off of group chats.
Right.
And just excluded her. Apparently, the truth, according to my daughter, the truth has all come out, and the tide has turned. Now that we're gone, everybody understands this other child's true behavior, and more instances like this happened after we left.
Of course.
And so, yes, exactly.
Of course, because you'll eat each other alive at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like this, the amazing thing about the California school system, that, as I was saying at the beginning, they're spending all this time going over identity and whatnot for the first several hours of the school day. Right. And it's kind of like, okay, you're shifting the focus of your energy onto this thing, and you think this is proper education, but the truth is going to out. Like, the world doesn't care about this. At least it doesn't care about this when you're applying for a job. Right. Like, at some point, competence and ability are going to win the day.
And people, compassion. Right. And respect.
Right. And look, why is it that there's this fantastic Awaken with JP. There's this amazing, famous satirical comedian who does all of these spoofs. He plays these multiple character skits, and he's very, very famous. He's great. He's got this long red hair. Right. He's great, right? And he was doing this spoof on elementary education in California, where he's playing this little boy, and he's like, "Okay, are you a boy?" And the guy's like, "I mean, I think I am." And he's like, "But how do you know?"
Oh,
he's
JP,
like,
yes, I know who you're talking about.
JP, right?
The ripped guy.
And he's like, yes, super ripped, right?
Yes,
he's great. And the dude's like, "I mean, I guess I don't know." He's like, "But if you say you don't know, maybe you're non-binary. And if you're non-binary, you get all kinds of attention and great things. Do you think you want to try it?" And this 6-year-old's like, "Okay, sure, I'm non-binary." He's like, "Awesome, good for you, yes." And he's like, "But what if I'm a boy again?" And they're like, "Oh, well, then we don't care about you at all."
I think I actually did see that.
Yeah, and it really kills me. There's this wonderful book that's heartbreaking. I believe it's called the War Against Boys, or the War on Boys.
I actually spoke to your wife about this book.
I mean, just so heartbreaking. And you have, at this point, you have 50% more women than men in higher education, right? And nobody cares at all about this. Like, if you're a random straight white dude and you want to try to get a scholarship for something, aside from just overwhelming merit, academic merit, it's almost impossible. It's like there are all kinds of programs to get more women in and more minorities.
That's what I said to my daughter. I said, "You think you have it bad? You could be a guy."
I had this great, interesting, social experiment that I thought would be so great, and I would always tell my students about it. I'm like, "Listen, this is what we need. We need more trans dudes, because this is what would happen. Okay, if more young women become trans and they decide that they're going to be boys, okay, right. The problem is we only have a couple of them. We need more of them, because if we have a couple of them, then they get a bunch of attention and they get a bunch of accommodations, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so brave." Right. But if we had more of them, then it would be normal, and the second it becomes normal, it's women boring. Would then realize, "Oh, I'm just an ugly dude now, and nobody's hated more than an ugly dude." No one is more just reviled in the world than an average, poor-looking man. Right? Like a white dude. Right? It's like, the more we have of those, they'd be like, "Oh, this really isn't like, what about all that like male privilege?" It's like, no, you get to be a trash plumber for Roto-Rooter now. Like, you don't
You're not special.
You don't look like Brad Pitt.
Right.
You can't sing. You can't do anything. And if you're a guy, we're really concerned with what you can do. We don't really care about you as a person. Right. If you want to be cared about as a person, you better go back to being a teenage girl. And they're like, "Oh, okay, we'll crush the entire trans movement in one foul swoop if we did this." It would be hilarious. Right. Well, I think it would be funny.
To be honest, it's all kind of over my head. I'm kind of like my younger daughter, and like, I'm just confused by it all. Like, I'm just confused by it all. And I really, it just really makes me sad and confused and like, what?
Well, you think it's sad now. You think it's sad now. Wait until the 3rd and 4th and 5th graders who aren't learning in public high school or public elementary school make it to high school and then to the real world, because this is the crisis that we are manufacturing with compassion. We are being compassionate. We are talking about identity. We are making it the foremost topic in all public elementary schools in California. They will know their identity. They ain't going to know math.
Right.
They're not going to know phonics.
Exactly.
They're not going to know all the boring
They
stuff that
certainly
everyone
aren't gonna
hates.
know how to write.
They're not going to know how to write. And then when they make it to 19 and they're not going to a great college, or their parents don't have the resources to send them to college, and then they have to actually enter the real world, that's
It's frightening.
going to be upsetting.
But what is the real world going to be at that point?
You know what's interesting about this? I don't think the real world's going to change that much. I think corporations are going to continue to do lip service to wokeism and whatever, just so they can keep, like, everybody puts out a flag, you know, for a month, and Chevron keeps making gas,
Right.
and Nike keeps making shoes,
Right.
and everyone just moves on.
So what will be next? I mean, right? Is there something coming on the heels of this? Like when this movement is over, when the rights of these individuals aren't forefront, there will be something else.
Well, like,
Possibly.
I think we're already seeing it. I think the vast majority of people are segregating themselves, if possible, to either areas that continue to push more and more and more, like, compassion and political ideology, and just really thrive in that weird area, and those people that are not living there and either fight it within their community, or they just move out of the community to somewhere. It's like, let's just live like normal people.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and by the way, if you want to put on other clothes, you put on other clothes. Like, I don't care, but like, I'm not participating to the level that I'm sure other people would want me to in your thing.
And that's exactly what happened to my daughter. She never spoke out against this girl's beliefs or feelings or about her situation. She just said, hey, don't scoff about me moving to Idaho. Like, just don't do that, please.
But nobody cares about her feelings.
Exactly.
Because her feelings were not rooted around the right thing.
Exactly.
Right? If her feelings had been rooted around identity, everybody would have paid attention.
Right.
Right. But a very interesting issue that we're having now is it's no longer about acceptance or tolerance. No. It's literally 100% about participation. Right? Because it's not even enough that people are allowed to have, like, Pride Month. Like, if you don't participate in that, fully participate, not only acknowledge, have it in your face, and do what they want you to, like, dance, monkey.
Right.
Like, if you don't do it,
that's very much the way it feels.
Right.
Yes.
Then people come after you. You can get in trouble. You can get this. You can get that. And your business could be affected, because it's not about people being allowed to be people. It's literally about social manipulation, social pressure, getting people to act and say the way that you want them to act.
And it's selective rights. I mean, you know, when we're talking about human rights, like right now, this is the right that gets all the money, all the attention, all the acceptance. There's plenty of other rights of people that have been wronged that are just straight up ignored. Right. And it's just so selective. This is what the media says that we need to honor right now. And I got
in this huge argument with with a woman who was trying to send me hate mail. And as I do always with hate mail, I'm like, oh, thank you for your perspective. Like, I appreciate you. And, you know, if you ever want to come on the show and chat, and, you know, this woman was going off about, you know, like, trans acceptance and like all of these things. I'm like, okay, you realize. And she's like, and I'm Hispanic, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, if you're Hispanic, how is it that you are not incensed by the injustices dealt to the Hispanic community?
Right.
And here you're focusing on this, like, exceedingly high-end socioeconomic, predominantly female thing that is happening. And you care way more about, like, the 0.01% of the population and what goes on with them. And I mean, at the public high school in the area, I mean, there are people walking around with, like, tails on and they're furries. And if you dare you say anything about the girl dressed up like a fox, right? Like full on nose, like ears, that tail, and you can't say anything about it. And by the way,
she identifies as a fox.
Yeah, she identifies as fox. This is, like, real stuff. And by the way, if you don't participate and call her whatever she wants to be called, then you're like this furry phobic, you know, like, I can't get into it. But the point is,
I understand.
It's like, how is it that you're neglecting the injustices that are being dealt to, you know, the Hispanic community? I had a really good friend who years back who would do class action lawsuits for the agricultural community in the Central Valley in California. He's like, these poor people are killing, like, literally killing themselves. Just, and again, they're here, some illegally, some not, right? Some have work permits and stuff, but they're dying to get out of the deplorable situation that they're in Mexico, and like
Right.
honest, hardworking people.
Right.
And again, not all of them, but a lot of them, and they're not being treated well by the ag community.
Right.
It's like, how is it that you shop at like Whole Foods
Right.
and you like buy your expensive strawberries and
Right.
stuff, and your Honeycrisp apples and your kale for your kale shake, and then you come and the cross
Yes.
you want to die
Yes.
on is this.
Yes.
With like the super high-end economically privileged individuals
Right.
who just want to be called a different pronoun.
Right. Right. No, I think that there's just like so much virtue, like the virtuous, right? The virtue signaling, like all of that is just like, it's dominating our life right now. Like, you must feel this way about this topic to be a good person. If you feel this way, or even if you're in the middle, you're not really a good person. I think that's the messaging that like so many people are caught up in, and they're afraid to say like, wait a minute, I'm just confused. I don't understand. Like
Right.
when like all of my life, a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl. And now I'm supposed to wrap my head around this whole concept and understand and accept that.
And participate.
And
That's the thing.
participate. Yeah. And I like, and I think a lot of people are afraid to say, no, thanks, or I don't
Or like,
get
you
it.
do you, but
Yeah.
like, I'm not.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to be over here doing my own
thing.
life.
Right. What feels safe and comfortable to me is different than what feels safe and comfortable to you, and let's just leave it at that. But I'm equally as important as a human being as you are. Let's just make sure that we've established that, just like what happened to my daughter. My feelings and this other student's feelings, they're equal.
Right.
So
yeah, and again, I think the thing that's beautiful about the public schools here in Idaho that I've at least experienced is that they are schools.
Yes.
Like, you are going there
Yes.
not to find this like grand expression. The
Yes.
teachers, at least in my experience, are not interested in making sure that all the students have the right political leanings.
Right.
The teachers and the administrators and the parents in general. I don't feel like parents here are trying to get the schools to be something other than just educational institutions.
I think West Ada just passed a law, something they put forward that said that the teachers can't display anything in their classroom that would reflect any kind of political ideology or any kind of political leaning. Like, it has to be neutral.
Because this is math class.
Yeah,
This is math class.
Right? Exactly. So, like, let's take it back to what we talked about at the beginning. It's like the boys are already distracted by the girls wearing lack of clothing. Now you have another student in the class that, has their furries going. So, like, let's just try to get back to learning, right? Let's just help a teacher out.
Help a teacher out.
I think that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm always looking out for the teacher. Come on, So anyway, let's just bring it back.
Joy, God bless you. Listen to me. I'm going to let you go. Oh, thank you for coming. How long have we been talking?
I don't know.
This has been a thing. Almost an hour, 48 minutes. God bless you, woman.
Good job to all the people hanging in there.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Joy. You're the best. Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you. Thanks for having me.
We chased our pleasures here, dug our treasures there. But can you still recall the time we cried? Break on through to the other side. Break on through.